What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at one of the first pieces that we covered last week, where we looked at the 4 pieces that we've got in recently. Today we're going to be looking at a really beautiful Longines from 1954. I think it's unique in very many different ways, has sort of subtle details that make it kind of stand out amongst vintage Longines. And I'm sure if you saw the thumbnail, you'll agree with me that there are some interesting pieces to add about this specific watch. I'm very excited about it. It's definitely one of the highlights for the 4 pieces that we covered last week. So we're going to jump into this piece, get into the history of the reference, history of the movement, case, all that kind of stuff. Hopefully that will give you some interesting things about Longines as a brand, and also this reference to learn about, because I think that's one of the focuses for the channel, is to make sure that I'm educating individuals about vintage watches, and I think that's kind of the aim. So without further ado, let's get into it. This year, trends in watches have been pretty clear. Smaller sizes are becoming more popular, and an additional flair a watch can bring is being desired by collectors. Whether that flair comes from something like a stone dial or interesting case design, or maybe diamonds, collectors seem to know what they're looking for. What's extremely important, though, is that the flair of the watch is how the watch came when it was produced by its manufacturer. It means the references one would wear is sort of off the traditional path for the company who produced them, and gives the watch a bit more exclusivity for the collector. There are plenty of watches that come to mind when thinking about this trend. I highly recommend that you check out the Monaco Legends group Instagram, because I think they have some really interesting examples that are very special pieces, that are incredible factory set diamonds that have been added to a lot of sports model Rolex watches. The question really comes up then, what does that mean for vintage watches? Naturally, sort of oddball references have become more important to collectors, but something else has sort of gained popularity, and that is diamond set dials on vintage watches. And so today what we're going to be doing is looking at exactly that, a very special vintage Longines with sort of that motif. So the watch that you see in front of you here is the reference 727-S-724-40. This watch, like many others covered on Life and the Wrist, seems to be a fairly rare reference. The watch was manufactured in 1954, and looking online, I can see one other example of this specific reference that is being sold in London. The reference is a 34mm watch cased in 14-karat solid yellow gold. Typically, when collectors look at vintage Longines, there's always an abundance of gold-filled or gold-plated watches, and so solid gold watches are quite uncommon, which kind of makes this watch a bit more special than maybe some other vintage Longines that you've seen in recent months or on this channel. On the case back of the watch, you'll see the inscription D and A. You'll see it up here where it says 14-karat gold. There's a DNA signature there. On the inside of the case back, it is also printed. This inscription is referencing the company that produced this really beautiful solid gold case, which is DiVincenzo Arienti, a Brooklyn-based casemaker who manufactured cases for brands like Longines, Omega, Rolex, and Hamilton. The reason why this case was produced in the USA was Swiss brands were actually being taxed at quite a high rate during this period for importing their cases, and so to avoid the high taxes, many brands would commission cases to be made in the USA that were destined to be sold here, and then all they would need to do is send their movements and possibly dials. And so this reference is a good example of exactly what I've just described. If you look at the case is extremely strong. The two-piece case, you can see, there's a case back, and then the top portion of the case looks really strong, especially considering the way that the lugs integrate with the watch. As you can see from this side view, the lugs don't curve too much, so they point quite straight out from the case. There are some really attractive bevels on both the left and right side of each lug. You can definitely see the inside bevel on this lower, if I can get into focus, you can see both the inside and outside bevel sort of shimmering there. And the way that the lug sort of inserts into the case is extremely strong and gives it a really great look. I apologize for the noise there. At 44 millimeters, the one may think that the watch is a little bit that would sit a little bit smaller, but the lug design kind of forces the watch a few sizes up, which is quite nice because they extend so far out from the case. As mentioned previously, the watch was destined for the USA market. It was sold by the Longines Wittnauer Watch Company that operates out of New York and Montreal. The company's name is engraved on the inside of the case back. Wittnauer was a successful brand in the USA and was acquired by Longines in 1950, just after World War II, where they became a distribution partner for Longines. Just after in 1969, Longines Wittnauer was sold to Westinghouse Electric Corporation, and in 1994, Longines ended their distribution relationship with Wittnauer. But during their partnership, many different models hit the market that are of interest to collectors today. I think this is a really great example of that. Get the focus there so you can see it. Not the entire piece of this watch was manufactured in the USA. This watch is running on the caliber 23 ZS movement. On the bridge that suspends the balance wheel, one can see an engraving that reads LXW. This inscription was the import code used by the Longines Wittnauer Group when they imported movements from Switzerland to the USA. So it's likely this movement was put together in Switzerland, shipped, and imported to the USA. It then met up with this fabulous 14 karat gold solid yellow gold case made by DiVincenzo and Arienti. The caliber 23 ZS movement is a fairly historic movement for Longines. It was introduced in 1948 and was an upgrade from its predecessor, the caliber 10.68Z, that was introduced in 1925. This is a long time to go without upgrading movement, so it was definitely in need of having that happen. To upgrade the movement had a shock-resistant system and anti-magnetic protection added to it, which were both sort of concepts that were extremely evident after World War II and became kind of a staple for watches after the war. It was also, when you consider this watch, the movement, it was also quite historic considering how much of an impact the war had on European economies. So to release a new caliber so close afterwards was astonishing. The watch features a center seconds complication, whereas the sister movement, the 23Z, the caliber 23Z, had a subsidiary seconds, which would be lit by the 6 o'clock hour marker. The steel movement has an incredibly beautiful look to it. It's beautifully constructed and really attractive to look at. One thing that I haven't mentioned and was kind of a big difference with this caliber than maybe other versions of this watch is the dial. The dial has quite a few special parts to it. So as you can see, it's got this, and maybe I'll zoom in so you can see it. So if you look at the dial, it has a two-sector, kind of like a sector-like dial. You have an outer ring and an inner ring. The inner sector of the dial has a painted minute track that is where the main elements of time are told. Looking at the Longines signature above the gold applied Longines logo, it's likely the dial has been polished and possibly refinished. If you look at the G in the Longines name on the dial, it's missing features that is normally evident on the signature of Longines. Essentially, when you draw the G, it's missing sort of that top line that Longines typically has in their signature, and I'll try to get a nice little shot there for you. We'll zoom out just a little bit. But I don't think it really detracts from the overall beauty of this watch, because it really is a beautiful looking piece. Moving to the outer sort of sector of the dial, the sector is raised and has a really beautiful guilloche finishing that is applied to every other hour marker. The hour markers obviously being gold, sort of matching the shape of the Dauphine hands that you see on this watch. I think this alone is really something that's worth pulling out a loop and being mesmerized for a few minutes on. The guilloche finishing really is incredibly beautiful, and I think is a really nice feature of this specific watch. Then at 12, 3, 6, and 9, you see the wedge-style hour markers were replaced with these round-cut diamonds. This extra feature gives the watch a whole different level of interest. And I think these subtle features like the guilloche finishing, these round-cut diamonds, and the solid gold case give the watch an understated features that can be enjoyed by the wearer. This watch does have an original Longines watch box, service booklet, and guarantee, and in the instruction manuals from the 1950s. It's likely that they probably were not the original ones that came with this piece, but the reason being is the guarantee and instruction manual features a purchase date written in from the 1950s, which was actually 4 years from when this watch was actually manufactured. But it's nice to have a box and documents that came with Longines watches during this era, and I think it keeps the watch true to what it probably would have been like to buy a piece in the 1950s. I'll quickly put this piece on for you so you can kind of see the size. As I mentioned, it fits on the larger side if you compare it to maybe some other 34mm pieces, mainly driven by the fact that the lugs are I apologize, I've got to get the focus here for you. So you can see the watch. Let me pull back my sleeve so you can really see it. Clearly, you can see that this watch fits a little bit larger based on the way that the lugs really are pronounced outwards, and kind of maybe bring it up to fitting a little bit bigger than a typical 34mm watch. I think there are plenty of old sayings that sort of discourage, following trends and really focusing on sort of classic pieces. While diamond dials seem to be a huge trend this year, I think this watch is everything but a trend. I think the subtle details that collectors know about this watch gives it way more meaning. Things like a guilloche dial, the round cut diamonds, and the 23ZS movement, as well as this incredible solid gold case. And I think these give the watch more meaning, and I think it places it nicely amongst watches that would be classified as classics. I also think it's just another great example of how Longines really stood amongst the giants during this era. I hope you enjoyed taking a look at this really beautiful solid 14 karat gold, yellow gold Longines from 1954 with this really cool guilloche and diamond dial. I think this is a really unique Longines, and I think it also has such an interesting, it represents a really interesting place in understanding the brand and how they operated. Case being made in the US by DiVincenzo and Arienti, the movement being pretty historic in sort of the general line of time-only pieces or time-only movements that Longines made. And I think it's a really interesting way of sort of learning about Longines. So hope you enjoyed taking a look at this. As always, there will be an article on lifefromthewrist.com if you want to check out that and see more pictures of this watch. I encourage you to head over there. Let me know in the comment section below what you think about this piece. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you wouldn't mind doing all the YouTube normal stuff, like, comment, subscribe, share this video with a friend who might be interested in watches. It really does help me out. And with that said, guys, thank you so much for watching this video, and we'll catch you in the next one.